We are so honored tonight to have Mr. Bing Goyi with us. He arrived here in America in 1960 from Indonesia via Holland, where he spent several years before embarking here. He is the CEO of the Goyi Center, and he is the director of the newly established Michigan Office for New Americans, now just a little over 1 year old. He has received numerous awards for entrepreneurship and his promotion of diversity in the West Michigan community, and we are just so proud to have him here with us tonight. Please help me welcome our guest speaker tonight, Mr. Bing Goyi.
Thank you, Gary, for that nice introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad and honored to have been asked to make this presentation here tonight. Before I do that, let me thank some people here, Dixie Anderson, Erica Kubik, and also Mark, who's at the control panel tonight. Thank you so much for making my job easier tonight. And also I want to thank the members of the World Affairs Council and also for the Kent District Library, who is tonight's sponsor. So thank you so much to all of those individuals. One individual that I really want to thank, and I know I'll embarrass her, but Jeannie Vogel, where are you? Sitting, standing, where are you? Jeannie Vogel? Oh, right there. Jeannie Vogel, give her a hand. She's the one that helped do a lot of the research here tonight for me. Thank you so much, Jeannie, for doing that. And before I begin my remarks, let me thank the students also as well and welcome them to this particular presentation. And for all of those of you who are connected to the Asian communities, Happy New Year. The year 2016, the year of the monkey. Now, you have to understand, World Affairs Council must have known that red is the color for the year of the monkey. That's why my tie is red, because I need a lot of luck tonight. So thank you so much for all of those, and I'm really excited to do that. So, you know, we've had this conversation on immigration for many, many years, but it has taken a much greater importance due to the presidential elections, in which the conversation on immigration has become, in my estimation, very toxic and led by a lot of misinformation. So the goal tonight is not to demonize any political party. If I say something that may offend you because you're supporting a particular candidate, it's not my intent to really do anything of that nature. I'm hoping to just share with you tonight some information that hopefully you can take back and have those conversations amongst your group of friends and colleagues, because I think it's an important conversation, and I want to talk about immigration from that perspective. You know, one of the things that I always remember that someone said, and I don't know who the author is, but it always says, you know, when we forget our history, we will repeat our history. And when I hear the conversation today, which really brings a lot of concern to me, a lot of fear to me, is that we forget. We forget what we have done to many different groups of immigrants that have come to this country. I mean, it's just as recent as, you know, when I was listening to a lecture on Fred Korematsude, a Japanese American who was interned, and when I listened to his story, a lot of the conversation around the reasons why that is legitimate to intern Japanese Americans is what we're talking about today with Muslims. We forget our history and we repeat it. Or when we talk about the history of how the United States turned away Jews from Germany, the same conversation that we're having today about Muslims is happening there. And I just recently found out that Anne Frank's family was given permission and ready to come to the United States until the government decided that that was not allowed because they were part of a group that they were fearful of. So I think tonight's conversation with you, and it is a conversation, is to say, let us look at the data. Let us look at what our history is. And let us look at what is really what benefits that immigration has contributed to not only our nation, but to the state of Michigan. So as Gary said, My family and I immigrated to the United States and arrived in the United States in 1960. So here is the Grand Rapids Press. Really interesting. It must have been a slow news day in Grand Rapids. And here is the original front page of the Grand Rapids Press. Our picture is on the front page. The date, as you can see, is January 9, 1960. That's when we arrived in Grand Rapids at the train station. And the headlines of that day, and again, sometimes you wonder if we ever changed our conversations. One of the headlines is, "More jobs for Michigan." So again, it's kind of interesting, but we're very proud of this. We're very excited to be a part of our great city of Grand Rapids. And we've really enjoyed our time here. So let's go to our history of immigrations to Michigan. And as you can see, excuse me, there has been immigration to Michigan a long time ago. And the immigration pattern has evolved. It continues to evolve, from Europe, then to Latin American countries, then to Middle Eastern countries, Cubans, immigration, Vietnamese. But what is really interesting is that our state, from 1990 to 2013, our immigrant foreign-born population rose from 3.8% to 6.2% today. That's a significant increase. And that is something that we should be proud of, and really what that gives us is that if you think about this, look at all the things that these particular national groups has brought to Michigan. Now, from my perspective, just think about this. If we didn't have the Chinese immigration, who would know about the Year of the Monkey, right? Who would know hot and sour soup, right? Or egg rolls, or whatever these things. So we have a lot. And if you look at the history, we're known as the Dutch city, and we know about all the different contributions the Dutch community and has helped build the West Michigan area. But the Irish did the same thing. They worked hard. They built canals. They did all kinds of different things. We also have seen immigration in the Upper Peninsula of miners and that worked in the mining and lumbering businesses. And in 1921, just interestingly enough, in 1921, the first mosque opened in Highland Park, 1 block from Ford's Model T factory. Why? Because that's where people came to gather and did the work there. In 1910, many Polish moved to Hamtramck when the Dodge brothers opened their new auto plant in there. And interestingly enough, this is not like a new thing for the state of Michigan. In 1939, students in the Detroit public schools were speaking more than 35 languages. Immigration is part of our DNA in the state of Michigan. The Vietnamese migration, as you know, it ended at the end of the year, at the end of the Vietnam War. Here's another interesting statistic. European immigrants in Michigan today represent more than 32 countries. So immigration is part of our history, and they have brought many, many positive cultural and economic benefits to us. And here's the thing which I think that all of us, and I know this from my own personal history, all immigrants, past and present, foreign and domestic, no matter what country they come from, they come to Michigan, they come to the United States to live the American dream, to participate in the American dream. They want a job, they want a home, they want something better for their children. I remember my father sitting around the dinner table when we were in the Netherlands, and he would talk about his dream of being able to bring his family, to bring his children to America, because he felt that America was this land of opportunity where his children can succeed. Because that's what immigrants did. They thought about their children. And it wasn't for any other reason. They just wanted to have the ability to bring their children a better life. So immigration, it was in the state of Michigan, is part of its whole history. In fact, in 1869, then Michigan's governor, Henry Crapo, appointed an immigration commissioner who he sent to Germany to live there from 1870 to 1875 to promote immigration to Michigan from German states and other countries in Europe. Interesting, isn't it? There was such an understanding of how important immigration and immigrants can be. And then in 1881, when there was a publication about Michigan's assets, it was published in German, Dutch, French, and Swedish. All these things are the things that makes us such a great state. So, when we talk about immigration, what is the philosophy behind that? What are the principles behind that the United States is now trying to, or that has based their policies on? It really is in 4 areas: to reunify families, to admit immigrants with valuable skills, to protect refugees, and to promote diversity. So, in 1952, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, INA, is the body of law that we are now under currently, how we process and implement our immigration policy. So our immigration policy today allows for an annual worldwide limit of 675,000 permanent immigrants. 675,000. People say, that seems like a lot, but if you take that in the context of the whole population of the United States, it's about 0.002% of the United States population of 319 million. And the types of visas that are being used to bring immigrants to the United States are in these areas. One is the family-based visa, which is the reunification of families, employment-based visas, protection of refugees, and diversity visas. So let me explain, just give you an overview of what that is. So family-based visas, there are 480,000 visas available. Its purpose really is to bring people who if you've come here and you have family members still living in the country, in your original country, you are given permission to apply for a visa for that person or persons to come and to be reunited with you. So you don't have to be a U.S. citizen, but you have to be what they call a lawful permanent resident to be able to apply for that family-based immigration visa. So 480,000 out of the 675,000 is allotted for that particular visa. The employment-based visas are many. There are many different kinds of visas. Some are permanent, some are temporary. Many temporary visa categories have limited numbers of availability. So, rather than me giving you all this information about that, because it's really, really, confusing. If you're interested, USCIS will certainly be a good call to make for you. But there are many different kinds of these temporary visas, and you can see all these things. Now, for the students, you probably know this. If you're an international student here at Aquinas College, you have an F1 and a J1 visa, and then you also have another education visa called M1. And again, there's a lot of different visas for those for students to be able to come and study here in the United States. The employment-sponsored visas, which could turn into a permanent visa, are these particular employer-sponsored visas. These are the kinds of visas in which the employer who is interested in hiring an international worker can apply under. So EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4 are those kinds of visas. And here again, one of the stipulations that the employer has to do or has to prove is that the employer is not able to hire a U.S. citizen for that particular job. They just can't hire. They must prove to the USCIS that they are unable to fill that job with a U.S. resident, and therefore they are applying for the special visa in order to hire that person in their organization. And it is not, besides proving to the United States government, it is also a very costly process. So most companies, if they're committed to this, they're going to spend $5,000, $8,000 per application. And here's where I think we have to look at our immigration policies. We have, in the state of Michigan, we know we have many jobs that needs to be filled with individuals who have a talent in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There are currently, in the United States, 75,000 employment-based visas available. Last application cycle, there were about 175,000 applications. So we have a lot of need, and our immigration policies today just won't let us be able to fill those because we have such a low number of employment-based visas available. The EB-5 visa is a visa in which international investors can invest anywhere from $500,000 minimum based on certain criteria to up to $1 million or more. And if their investment creates 10 new jobs for US citizens, they will be, in 2 years, they will be able to receive a green card, which allows them to begin the process to apply for citizenship. So the question becomes, why is immigration important now? Well, before I do that, let me give you one more piece of information which may be of interest to you. The conversation sometimes that we hear today is that, boy, we're being overrun in this country by immigrants and refugees. And the United States also has in its policy that there's a per country ceiling of 7%. So not one country can send more than 7% of the total number of visas available. So you can't have, and this is why for a country like China and India, there is a long, long, long waiting list. So only 7% of the total number of visas granted is limited to one particular country. The other part, which I don't think I put it on here, and I'm sorry to do that, but there's what they call a diversity visa program. And this visa program is targeted for those countries that have very few immigrants coming to the United States. The United States is saying diversity is important, and therefore we want to make sure that not any one country dominates, and then those countries that are not an active part of our immigration policy or immigrants coming to this country, they have a special visa called a diversity visa. So why is immigration important? Well, if you look at what Michigan has done or has experienced in the last decade, we lost a lot of jobs, and we all experienced that. Michigan was the only state in the nation to lose population in the last census. Although we're seeing some growth already since then, but it's very small. We also realized that we're an aging population. 25% of our Michigan population will be 65 years or older by the year 2040. And in 2010, Georgetown University did a study on behalf of an organization in Michigan, and they said that by the year 2018, which is not that far away from us, 274,000 STEM-related field jobs will need to be filled because of growth, because of attrition, retirement, all those kinds of things. So we have a tremendous need, and we have a challenge, and the question for us is, what and how will we address that? And Governor Snyder, in one of his presentations during this time, said that what made Michigan great in the past, he believes will also make Michigan great in the future, and that is immigration. So what are we trying to build on? Well, right now in the state of Michigan, immigrants, business owners in 2010 generated $1.8 billion of total net business income. Between 2006 and 2010, over 30,000 new businesses started by immigrants. Currently, there's about 10.4% of all business owners in Michigan are immigrants. So we have a need, and we have also a base that we can build on. The immigrants have the tremendous opportunity, economic power. They bring a lot of billions of dollars in tax revenues. There's a lot of benefits that we can have if we continue our immigration into the state of Michigan. And in the state of Michigan, we certainly have been blessed by companies that were started by immigrants. I mean, you think about this. Myers, right? Hendrik Meyer, Dutch immigrant, what did he start? Greenville. Now, employs thousands of Michigan people. Dow Chemical, Masco. There's a small, not even a small, but a plastic injection molding company called Primera in Holland, owned by a Mexican immigrant, and does a lot of great work in the Lakeshore. So you probably know people and individual business owners like that yourself. So the economic impact is really something that we need to take a look at and begin to discuss this. Here are some specific statistics about certain immigrant groups in the state of Michigan. Now, we hear a lot about Arab Americans, and what we hear in today's conversation is not very positive. But here's the reality. Here's the statistics about Arab Americans. Yes, we have the largest proportion of Arab Americans in the United States in Dearborn, Michigan. But did you know that Arab American employment accounted for $7.7 billion in total earnings in 4 counties? This is just the metro area, Metro Detroit area. $7.7 billion, generating an estimated $544 million in state tax revenue. If we keep talking the way we keep talking, and we lose that, what would happen to our quality of life if we lose $544 million of tax revenue? So they are. American businesses and consumer spending supports an estimated 141,541 jobs. So these are things that we don't hear in our conversations about immigration. We don't hear that in the conversations we have about Arab Americans. And I think that's unfortunate because really, we have some tremendous benefits when we can bring in new immigrants, new Americans into our state that will be able to contribute to our quality of life. You look at the Hispanic, Latino communities, and again, these are statistics that again, we don't hear that in our national conversation or even in our state conversation about the contributions that this particular population and this particular group of immigrants have brought to the state of Michigan. Asian Americans in the same way. These are just amazing statistics that I think that, again, if we knew these things and we begin to talk about these things, hopefully people will begin to understand that, there are a lot of benefits and a lot of opportunities for us to receive from these particular immigrant groups. So if you look at this and you look at the combined buying power, purchasing power from the Latino and the Asian populations, Asian American immigrant groups, it is almost $21 billion, $21.6 billion in the state of Michigan. That's what they bring. And what's also another interesting, as you may or may not know, agriculture is the 3rd largest economy in the state of Michigan. We have a $100 billion economy in the state of Michigan and growing. And yet, what we don't know, or most of us don't know, is that 28% of Michigan's 565,000 farms are immigrant-owned. So again, if we can look at immigration, and if we can look at the contributions that immigrants have made to the state of Michigan, and to the quality of life that you and I are enjoying, maybe the conversations could be different that we may have with our friends and colleagues. Entrepreneurship. It is proven, the data will show us that immigrants are more than twice as likely to start a business as American-born. Now, again, these statistics are not to diminish the value and the contributions that American-born citizens make to the United States, but these are statistics. These are the things that is going on in the immigrant communities and the immigrants who are coming here to the United States and to the state of Michigan. Interestingly enough, that 40% of our largest U.S. economies were founded by immigrants or their children, and that 7 of the 10 most valuable brands in the world were started by immigrants or those who were children of immigrants. In 2011, as of 2011, immigrant-run businesses employed 1 in 10 American workers. And what's another thing about immigration, and one that I think we have not taken advantage of as well as what we could have. And I talk about this a lot when I travel around the state, or not around the state, mostly to Detroit and Lansing, is to talk about the fact that when we bring in these immigrants and new Americans, their connections back to their home country is an asset that we should take advantage of. It is known that 60% of the immigrant business are more likely to export, and export is really what we wanted to try to focus on, is to send products from the state of Michigan into other countries. So there are some great benefits and things that we don't even know or are not aware of, and because of that, our conversations about immigration and immigrants is so negative. So these are some of the things that we need to begin to look at regarding immigrants and the impact that they may have. Another interesting statistic, you see some of these names. Another interesting statistics about immigration is that they also, when given the opportunities to participate in our economy, they influence these kinds of benefits to our states. Higher job growth in metropolitan areas, decline in unemployment, the revival of commerce and investments in declining areas, neighborhood revitalization. All these things are so critically important. If you look at Detroit and some of the communities there, you will begin to see how the influx of new immigrants, new Americans coming to those communities, have been able to revitalize some of these economically challenged neighborhoods. And that is part of the conversation our office is having with the mayor's office. How can we do that? Because you see, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to just bring a group of immigrants and we're just going to drop them in this neighborhood. Because we've tried to do that. And what we've created is a lot of tension, a lot of bad things happening. So what we're trying to do is we've created a process in saying, anytime we bring immigrants into a particular neighborhood, we must make sure that we talk to those who are in the neighborhoods already and begin to ask them at the beginning to help develop that transition plan so that they will become the builder of that integration plan. And so we have a lot to learn about how to do this effectively, but the bottom line is when we do it effectively, we can benefit in these particular areas. What is also interesting about this, there's a statistic in the last 1995 to 2005 in which in Silicon Valley, there were high-tech companies started, and 52% of those high-tech companies were started by an immigrant or a partner who was an immigrant. But here's an interesting statistic about Michigan. Michigan, in the same time frame, started high-tech companies here, in which 33% were started by immigrants. Now, we always talk about, well, can we have a Silicon Valley here in the state of Michigan? And I always say, absolutely, absolutely. And people say, wow, why would the immigrants come to Michigan for, when they have to deal with snow? Well, we don't have snow on February 8th. Maybe we can use that and show that picture today in our marketing materials. But what is interesting is that when we talk to our international students, and when we ask the question, if given the opportunity, would you stay in Michigan or would you choose another state that's warmer for you? Over 50%, 52% said they would stay in the state of Michigan. So we've got to figure out how to make sure we advocate for a change in our immigration policies that will allow us to keep our international students here, in the state of Michigan and become a part of our, revitalization of the state of Michigan. It's like Governor Snyder used to always say, why do we have these great institutions of higher learning like Aquinas and Grand Valley State University and Western Michigan and Central Michigan and Calvin and Hope and in all these colleges, and we educate them and then we send them home to become our competitors? It doesn't make sense. But we've got to figure out how to do that. And I know that unfortunately we're in an environment in which we just Congress can't seem to get together about what they can do rather than what they don't want to do. So hopefully we can get that going as well. Immigrants also excel in education, and we can see that, and we have that in terms of the statistics. Again, these are the talented individuals that we need to have to address the challenges of our economy in the state of Michigan and also the United States as well. What is interesting is that, there is a movement or there's some conversation in which, people are saying, well, let's get rid of those international students. They're taking positions away from, U.S. kids and all that kind of stuff. Well, we certainly don't want that to happen. We want every U.S. Student to be able to enter their institution of higher learning of their choice. But what we also don't want to do is to create the conversation in which our international students say, why do we want to go to Michigan? Just look at the statistics on number 2. 30,000 foreign students contributing $927 million to the state's economy. Now, it's not all about money, but the thing is, they do bring a benefit to our state that maybe we ought to take a look at and say, okay, if that's what it is, how can we make sure that that is not the only basis for bringing them in here, but that it does not impact negatively the opportunities for our U.S. children to be able to attend as tool of choice for themselves. It's kind of funny. I was speaking with a representative from Michigan State University and talking about international students, and he said, I don't know if this is true, but maybe there's probably some truth to it. So he said to me, Bing, what is our biggest challenge at Michigan State University at the end of the school year? Is how to get rid of these Mercedes and these Audis and all these cars that these international students buy, and then when they graduate, they leave it behind because they can't take it back to their country. Again, I'm just passing on what he told me, and I'm thinking, well, in reality, in some ways it does make sense. These international students, and we hear it, they do, they have the means necessary to not only study here, but they also have the means to have, to make those kinds of purchases. But what is really critically important for us is to recognize that, these are the statistics. They are 60% of Michigan engineering PhDs graduate are foreign-born. I mean, we just have to remember these are statistics. It's not about emotions. It's not about this. It's everything about the talent that we need and what they can contribute. Let me keep moving forward because I want to get to the refugee situation. But here's some more statistics. And this is the demand. These are statistics from our State of Michigan Bureau of Labor, Market Information, and Strategic Initiatives. These are the things that we are looking at in terms of needs for the state of Michigan. The demand for highly skilled workers is very high. But here again, let me make sure that I talk about this for just a second. In our office, we don't talk about high skilled or low skilled. We talk about specialized skills. Because the assumption that those who are part of our agricultural economy are low skilled workers is really unfair to them. And it paints a biased perception about them. Because you see, I don't care if you have a PhD in engineering, you will not get hired by a farmer who needs you to be able to know when to pick apples, how to pick blueberries, how to pick asparagus. That is a specialized skill. It is not a low skill. Not everyone can do it. So to portray those individuals working in the fields and harvesting as low-skilled workers is really unfair to them. And it really creates a negative stereotype about these individuals. They are individuals with very specialized skills. I will tell you, I wouldn't do it or I couldn't do it, and the farmers wouldn't want me to do it because I'll probably mess up their whole crop because I'll pick the wrong stuff at the wrong time and I'll bruise them and whatever, all those kinds of things. So for us, it's not about high skills or low skills, it's about specialized skills. So let me go to the refugee question because that's certainly been a lot of our conversations here in our nation. So the difference is that immigrants choose to leave their home country, refugees are forced to leave their home country to save their lives and preserve their, to flee for and preserve their freedom. So every year, the United States currently has a cap on refugees, about 70 to 75,000. Now, President Obama recently or last year said that he would like to increase that by, especially targeting the Syrian refugees, by increasing it by 10,000. Michigan historically receives about 4 to 6% of the total number of refugees that enter the United States. So as you can see, in these fiscal years, this is the number of refugees that have arrived in the state of Michigan. Last year, our numbers were a little lower, and there were 3,015 refugees that arrived in the United States. And there is a process for that, and I'll show you a video shortly about what that is. But usually the president, in consultation with Congress, will determine the numbers for refugees to be able to come into the United States. It's pretty small, but these are the different countries the refugees come from that are in resettling into the state of Michigan. These are where the refugees are resettling. What's interesting for us here in West Michigan is that we are the second largest region for resettling refugees. And that is through Lutheran Services, Social Services, and through Bethany Christian Services. And again, so if our numbers grow, then that numbers will also grow here for West Michigan and the Grand Rapids area. In the fiscal year 2015, these are where the refugees are coming from in particular, which is also a topic that is being discussed in our national conversations. So one of the things that, as you well know, is that Governor Snyder made a statement about pausing the refugee resettlement process in the state of Michigan. That created some confusion. Is he stopping it? Is he pausing it? What is he doing? And I think he tried to explain it in a Time editorial, but it didn't resonate or didn't get interpreted differently. But the statistics is this: the reality is this, that we continue to receive refugees. He made that statement in November of 2013, and since that statement came through, we still have refugees coming in because the governor was very clear about the fact that he didn't want to stop the current refugee individual families who already were in the pipeline to come to the United States, and he didn't want to stop that. So we still have refugees coming into the state of Michigan, and we continue to Bethany Christian Service and all the resettlement agencies continue to receive them here in the state of Michigan. Just some more statistics here. So here's where I'm going to show you a video to help you understand the vetting process of what these refugees go through, and also what the Syrian refugees go through, so that you have a better understanding of the process that I think is being somewhat misinterpreted.
Since the Syrian civil war began, more than 4 million people have fled that country, leaving their entire lives behind them. And the stories we've heard have been heartbreaking. Remember the tragic stories of children who drowned attempting to reach Europe with their families. That's why, once it was concluded that we can do it safely and responsibly, the President announced a plan to resettle at least 10,000 Syrian refugees in the United States within the next year. In the days since the Paris attack, many have tried to argue that accepting Syrian refugees, who, by the way, are mostly women, children, and families, means that we'd make America a more dangerous place. This ignores the reality that anyone who seeks and is approved for refugee status in the United States must first go through a rigorous security screening process. So let's walk through that process and what it looks like for a potential refugee. Meet Rima. Rima and her children have lost their home in Syria. They've made the dangerous journey out of the country, and now Rima is seeking refugee status in a place where she can keep her children safe. First, Rima must apply for refugee status through the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. This is the international organization in charge of protecting and assisting refugees. For Rima to be considered a refugee, she must show that she's been driven from her home due to a, quote, well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion, end quote. If Rima meets the above conditions, she may be referred for resettlement in a country such as the United States. But before she can enter the United States as a refugee, Rima must then undergo a security screening process that is more thorough than any other for people entering this country. She'll have a deep background check. Her biographic and biometric information will be cross-checked against law enforcement and intelligence databases. Rima will also have to pass an in-depth interview, including an interview with a specially trained DHS officer to determine her eligibility. If found eligible, she then receives a medical evaluation. From start to finish, this process includes the involvement of the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and the Department of Defense. All refugees, including Syrians, go through these security screening measures, and Syrians receive an enhanced review during this process. Over 23,000 Syrian refugee applicants have been referred to us by the UNHCR. Only about 2,000 have been admitted. Throughout history, we've seen that America has become a better nation by welcoming refugees in times of crisis. So many refugees and their children have gone on to make great contributions to our American society. Albert Einstein and Elie Wiesel, two Jews displaced by Nazi Germany, went on to become great Americans. We've seen great athletes such as Nadia Comaneci and Luol Deng flee communism and the Sudanese Civil War, respectively. Taking in refugees at a time of crisis is simply the right thing to do. We can and we will continue to ensure our own security while doing our share to welcome men, women, and children who are refugees fleeing violence. This is the United States of America. We can, we must, and we will do both these things.
Just one of the things that we have to start looking at is, if we believe that immigration is a big part of our continued growth within the state of Michigan in many different ways, culturally, economically, then these are some of the things that we must do. We must create a welcoming environment. You see, we can have all the we can try to do everything in terms of policy and things like that, but if we're not a welcoming community, they will choose other states that have, that will welcome them in many different ways. So let me just go quickly scroll through this. A community inventory means for us is that when we welcome immigrants and refugees into our state, into our city, into our neighborhoods, let's make sure that we have the availability of all the resources at their disposal. Here are some of the things, and if you are interested, I can give you information, but these are some of the cities that have actually intentionally targeted welcoming immigrants and new Americans into their communities, into their cities, and they have benefited greatly and have restored many of the different neighborhoods and things like that. Here's just some recommendations that we would have in terms of making that a welcoming environment for our immigrants or new Americans, as well as recognizing that in doing so, we will all enhance our own quality of life together. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll entertain any questions that you have at the present.
Thank you, Mr. Goy, and just a reminder to the audience that you can come down to either of the microphones or text me questions. I'm going to start with one of the first texted questions I got during Mr. Goy's presentation, and that was on immigrant entrepreneurs. You had mentioned that twice as many entrepreneurs are immigrants. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the reasons why that is, especially since you are an immigrant entrepreneur yourself?
Great question. Thank you for the question. I think that one of the reasons why is that entrepreneurs, as one of their fundamental characteristics for an entrepreneur, is that they're risk takers. And so for these immigrants and these people who are refugees, failing at a business is not a risk. They've already took the greatest risk of fleeing a country or leaving a country. I remember my parents, when they left and fled Indonesia because of President Sukarno's leadership, had to absolutely leave everything behind. I mean, here was a mom and a dad, 6 boys. My mom was pregnant with their 7th child. And they literally had to leave their homes, their cars, their bank accounts. I mean, they literally left with a suitcase in their hand. So entrepreneurship and for immigrants is probably not as risky as what they've already experienced in their life. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why they are more inclined to start their own business. Also, it's very difficult sometimes for these immigrants and new Americans coming to the countries because they can't get hired, because they don't speak the language well enough or a variety of different reasons. And so for them, survival is start your own business and create your own income. So I think those are some of the reasons I believe that immigrants start companies at a greater rate than U.S.-born citizens.
2 quick questions. You mentioned about the pause in immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Once the pipeline is empty, is Michigan still going to be a welcoming state?
Well, I believe so. I think that Governor Snyder certainly is committed to this. And if you read the original statement that he made, he said, before we accept more, he wanted to have some questions in terms of how is the federal government going to provide the necessary resources to, to be able to vet the increased number of refugees. He's always been a very pro-immigration, pro-refugee governor. I am confident that he will be doing that. I think that the pipeline, and one thing I didn't say on the slide frame, which I probably should have said, it takes almost 3 years for these refugees to come here. So the pipeline is pretty large right now. So, and I think he will make a decision before the 3 years. So.
My second question had to do with education. When you look at those who are coming into this country, to use some of our best schools, these are the best and the brightest that are being sent over here. To play devil's advocate, with our education system, how does a student in Detroit or Flint compete with the best and the brightest from throughout the world?
Well, I think that is, a hard question to answer, except for this way. In the United States, we need to look at what we're doing in our own educational system so that we can compete in a global, environment. So I wouldn't blame the students, the international students, for coming here, for trying to enhance their education. I think we as a country and as a state, we need to take a look at our own educational system and say, what is it that we are doing that will allow us to compete with the students that are coming in from other countries? Yes. Hey.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
One of the stats you had was that from 1990 to, 2013 or so, there was a substantial increase in the percentage of our Michigan population of immigrants. I think that was the stat. Do you have any insight as to why that occurred and any characterization of what that population looked like? And whether or not that population group differed substantially from earlier generations of immigrants. Are there any, qualitative differences or just differences?
I think that the number that was increased, it kind of gradually built up. But I think as you can see, the Middle Eastern immigration was increased significantly. I think that we're also increasing the number of Asian immigrations as well. Here's an interesting statistic, which probably we don't even know, but the Cuban immigration is quite high. Last year, I think, to an NPR story, like we received 45,000 Cuban immigrants into the United States, and that's been on a pretty continual basis, but that's pretty quiet immigration that nobody wants to talk about, because I think partly because the Cuban immigration policy kind of favors them over any other particular country or ethnic group, right?
My understanding is if you get here, if you're Cuban, you're in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's the wet foot, dry foot policy.
Yeah, that was the
right?
policy, right?
Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of the increase in immigration. I think that the faith communities are sponsoring, and the more sponsors for particular immigrant groups were increased. I think it was about, I can't remember, but it's not also the time in which, again, the immigration numbers increasing from the Asian continent as well. So I don't have the exact numbers, but I think that's probably where the increase came from.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Hi there, Bing. Thank you so much for all your comments and your education this evening for all of us. And having spent a career with the State of Michigan Economic Development Organization, one of the questions that I'd have for a lot of us here, a lot of students here, so right in the opportune time for them to make a real difference as they step out into the work world. What kinds of things can we do as individuals and communities to welcome immigration to our state and our communities? And what resources has the state of Michigan concentrated right now to help employ that? It's so tied with a lot of federal policy regarding immigration, so in some ways our hands are tied.
Yeah, as far as the state of Michigan, the Department of Health and Human Services has an office called the Office for Refugee Resettlement, and they receive federal funding that they can provide grants to resettlement agencies and other organizations to make sure that new Americans, new immigrants, when they come and arrive in the state of Michigan, are able to receive the necessary supports and the safety nets to be able to acclimate themselves into the state of Michigan and into the particular neighborhoods that they are there. For the students, and I mean for all of us, I think it's important for us to make sure that we have the right information and that we do challenge the toxic conversation around immigration. It's just painful to listen to the political conversation around immigration. It just doesn't make sense. Immigrants have made a significant contribution to the building of our great nation and to our great state. And students, my challenge to you is to make sure that, you research the data on immigration. This is not a political statement, honestly, but here's my concern, is that, when you look at our own history books, what do we talk about, or how do we highlight the contributions of immigrants and minorities to the establishment of a great nation? If you look at the history books, or at least when I was going to school in history books, and that was many, many years ago, when the Transcontinental Railroad was finished, what was the picture that you see in your history books? Who did they leave out in that picture? Right? The people who were actually working to build that railroad. And if you think about the stories about what happened when we as a nation turned away immigrants or refugees because of some perception. The two I mentioned, and I'm sure there are others, the Japanese internment and the denying of Jews who came to the United States thinking that they were allowed to come in and they were turned back because something happened while they were traveling. So I think we have to remember our history and challenge the students. I challenge it. Challenge, why is it that we're not learning about these things? And that's, that I think will help us to change the conversation. I think it will change our culture. I think we will all benefit, and I think that Michigan will become certainly a much more welcoming state and a destination of choice for many of these immigrants, although refugees don't have that choice initially. They are resettled based on certain policies and certain formulas. But here's the other part. After they are settled with that initial resettlement agency, after a few years, many of them pack up and move to different states where they believe they can find a better life. And hopefully they will choose Michigan as well.
Thank you for a good database presentation. The question that I have, building on the video that you showed, which referenced UNHCR, is linked to a personal issue that I've been following with an individual from Gaza who is obviously registered under UNRWA. And the mandate of UNHCR stops when it comes to the issue of Palestinian refugees. But working through the system and going through the Department of Justice website and the various agencies that are recommended within the state of Michigan, I found that it was nearly impossible to get anyone to deal with refugee immigration issues, particularly pertaining to Gaza. In your role at Mona, what advice might you have, or how do you see the issue of Gaza and refugees who are also, in some cases, drowning in boats trying to leave, being handled at the federal level, but then again also at the Michigan state level?
Honestly, I wish I could give you an answer. That is such a complicated issue, and really our office isn't even addressing that particular question because it's a federal, but it's an international process that you are questioning and asking for some clarification. I could BS my way through that, but I can't. So I'm sorry, I can't even answer that. But I understand the issue. It's just, for the United States, I guess that's about where I can maybe make a suggestion. We have to begin to start advocating our congressional representatives to take a look at our immigration policies and become a stronger advocate for refugees and immigration. We can't continue on the path that we are in today, where we are at today. We just can't. And we're going to get, other countries are going to try to recruit these individuals who can help them grow their economy, grow their country, all those kinds of things. So somewhere along the line, we as a people, we need to begin to challenge our current leadership and say, why aren't you willing to address this? Why aren't you willing to talk about this? And look at the data. Forget the emotions behind this stuff. Look at the data. Look at what we've already benefited from, and look what we can increase our benefits if we change our policies so that we can enhance the quality of life for everyone in our country.
Bing,
yes.
Great dialogue. Thank you very much. Lead into another question. We have maybe, I can't count that quickly, 100 people in the audience. What can we do? In the context of, if you look back 30, 40 years ago, governments were probably advocating for immigration, and companies were saying, no, we don't want them. We like where we are. If you look at today, it's reversed.
Yeah.
Most businesses, most business organizations are saying, we need these resources across the country. Most governmental bodies are saying, no, we don't want any more. So you've got 100 people that are willing to charge behind you. Right, we're over there. What would you recommend, if you could say 2 or 3 things that we could do to help you and help this immigration and refugee cause, what would you suggest?
Number one, every one of us should vote. Every one of us should be aware and educate ourselves on what are the issues and what is behind every candidate that on this particular issue and other issues. Because this issue is not just immigration. This issue, the ripple effect of having a sound, solid immigration policy has a ripple effect that, like I've always continue to say, will increase our quality of life or decrease our quality of life. So first and foremost, please vote. Because it's important. When you look at the privilege that we have of being able to vote in this country and we don't take advantage of it, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. Secondly, I think that one of the things that I would challenge all of us to do is there are Bethany Christian Services, Lutheran Social Services, your place of worship. There are opportunities for you to participate in the resettlement and the integration, and it's not assimilation, it's in the integration of people who come here from other parts of the world. Find out how you can get involved with those organizations and even with your own faith community, because you see, this is really a humanitarian issue too. None of us, just think about this. Just think about putting yourself in those shoes of immigrants coming to this country and not, knowing anything about this country, or having to experience the horrible results of, violence in their own particular country. The other part in terms of helping or becoming involved with that is what I think is very critical. I remember when I came to this country, my perception of America was based on what I saw on TV in the Netherlands. So what was it at that time? Okay, so I'm old, so okay. At that time, it was cowboys and Indians. That's all I knew about the United States, right? So what are people seeing who are immigrants, who have the privilege of having a TV set and looking or reading the news? What do they see of America? And so what I think is necessary for all of us to do is when we receive and welcome these new Americans into our neighborhoods, into our community, into our faith, worship, houses of worship, and all those kinds of things, is we need to help them understand that we don't know everything either, and that it's okay for them to talk about their perceptions. And then helping them understand, and then for us to commit to understand, their culture and benefit from the richness of their culture to enhance our own quality of life. I facetiously and humorously try to be humorous, but, we have 3 or 4 refugee families in our church. And, I never had Ethiopian foods until they said, why don't you come over to the house and eat this? And it was a strange experience, but it was good because it was great. It was good stuff. If you open yourself up to them, and they open themselves up to you because you are willing to do that, I think their lives and your lives will be much greater and richer because of that. So that's what I would suggest in terms of becoming this welcoming state, welcoming neighborhood, welcoming community, and benefiting from their gifts and their assets and their talents.
I'm going to step in with just a few questions from the audience. My phone has been blowing up, so we won't get to all of them, but first and foremost, the PowerPoint you presented tonight is so information-rich. Is there a way to get this information online? I know you have handouts up on all of our information desks as well, but how can...
Where's Jeannie?
Yeah.
Can we make that available? Okay.
And
how do we make it available?
I can jump in and just say, too, that I can facilitate that and have it available through the World Affairs Council as well. But maybe just one more question from the audience. And although that was kind of a great summary question, how do we welcome immigrants? But what do you think are the biggest challenges for groups coming in right now? The fear, the rhetoric, anything else?
It's like, put yourself in their shoes. You coming and going to a country that you have no familiarity with. What would you like to see happen that will make you feel welcomed and connected? Just answer that question, and then you have answered the question that you have raised, because that's really what needs to happen.
All I can say is, wow. I have learned so much tonight, and I feel so enlightened, and I have a whole new set of eyes to understand immigration. And so what a gift you have been to us tonight, sir. Thank you so much. And I fear I have mispronounced your name. It's Goey like joy. Is that correct?
Just don't call me late for dinner.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Very good.
No, you did well. Thank you.
And it's Bing like Bing Crosby, right?
Yeah, but don't ask me to sing.
Okay.
Because you empty this auditorium
Sounds
real
good.
quick.
We've got a special gift tonight for you, sir, as a token of our appreciation for your being here. This is a handcrafted pen with our World Affairs Council logo, made with Michigan wood, probably Michigan maple, made by Hal Fruit, one of our board council members,
Wow.
World Affairs Council of West Michigan. And so when you sign your special documents with this, you can think about the World Affairs Council.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.